water, which bears fruit at just the right time, and whose leaves don't fade. Whatever they do succeeds. That's not true for the wicked. They are like dust that the wind blows away. And that's why the wicked will have no standing in the court of justice, neither will sinners in the assembly of the righteous. Oh, there we go. The Lord is intimately acquainted with the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked is destroyed.
Thank you, Heather. Some of you are asking, what are all these lollipops and sweet things doing here? We had an awesome Sweet Dreams auction yesterday by Virginia. Where is she? She's hiding back there. Mamai. It was my first live auction. My hands went up. Anyway, and then our sweet Melanie, bye-bye, she did all the decorations. I just want to go inside her brain because look, these little confetti, like those are little packing peanuts that's been painted over with. Do not throw away your packing peanuts. Give them to me. Friends, it is so good to be here. It's been a wild ride. Have you been following up on what's been happening with our denomination? You have, and how are you feeling about it? Are you embarrassed about your denomination? I wrote saying I came feeling more aligned, more attuned, more with kind of where we are. So here's what happened with the United Methodists. We changed several of very harmful things, but very important things. The first one was regionalization. This is really important for us as United Methodists because, as you know, our denomination doesn't only reside here in the US, but it's all across the globe. And so issue like, what was the issue that we've been just fighting and battling over for the half century? It was on homosexuality, right? On LGBTQIA, which was placed. And the person who actually wrote it was saying, that was wrong of me, but none of those mattered, right? Because it was into a book of discipline. And all general conference, which happens every 4 years, except for the one that just happened, it had to be postponed due to COVID. And by a large number, we passed. So then what happened? We got regionalization passed, which means every ministry area will have more flexibility as to do ministry that makes sense for them. So part of homosexuality will also apply to this as well, because in parts of Africa, it's a sin to be out. That's the cultural context. That doesn't mean that there aren't queer people, but there are ways that they can make it more safe instead of having to imply. And so regionalization was really important. The second thing was we removed the harmful language that said that that is incompatible, that homosexuality was incompatible to Christian teaching, which barred from, we didn't ordain ministers for being gay. We rebel with that, but then you couldn't also officiate same-sex marriage. And so when this passed, folks, it was funny, on Facebook posts, I saw pictures coming out of the closet that were taken decades ago, but they were not allowed to show because you could be penalized for having said that you married somebody with same gender. And so there was just, celebrations, post pictures of people's marriage. And we changed also the language around social principles around marriage. Instead of saying man and a woman, we said by two adult consenting adults, right? And so it really leaves room for us to not discriminate and make it very clear that we United Methodists do not want to discriminate. And when we say the table is open, it really means open for all. So the song that we sang today that we began with was also a song that we sung together with 5,000 to 7,000 people at the General Conference in North Carolina. And it was just really awesome. It was so awesome. And it ties into our message. I'm going to have us hear the most recent message that our Bishop Cedric uploaded, I guess, for our greater Northwest context. And I want you to listen into his call. This is great. We removed what we did wrong, but where do we grow from here? Let's take it.
Greetings, Greater Northwest area. I am so happy to be back in the area after General Conference. By now, you may be aware of many historic accomplishments of General Conference. You may also be wondering what any or all of it means for us. There's so much to unpack, and we have time to do that. For now, I wish to highlight a few things that will be before us as we prepare for annual conference sessions and life beyond. First, I celebrate the collective will of the General Conference delegates to approve removal of the language that caused so much harm to LGBTQIA+ siblings and allies. That was the answer to many prayers and a balm for many souls. In the wake of that change that's already in effect, we must take note that those who are not in support of that change may feel vulnerable, left out, or concerned about the future of the church. I understand that. And that's why it's imperative that we ensure that when we say the United Methodist Church is a church for all, that we mean all. So no one is expected and no one will be bullied into doing anything that contradicts their convictions and values. The removal of the prohibitions and harmful language really gets us to a neutral point. No one is being penalized and no one is bound to discriminate. Second, the approval of the revised social principles allows us to have global conversations and perspectives on what matters around the world. We are not to be dominated by U.S.-centric ideas and principles. Our social principles are global in nature and much more inclusive of a broader perspective. Regionalization was a major topic before the delegates. It was approved, and regionalization will require ratification of several constitutional amendments. And that process will take some time to complete because all annual conferences around the world must vote on it, and the threshold of 2/3 of the aggregate of all voting is needed to approve constitutional amendments. The delegates approved sacramental rights for deacons. They approved a Compass retirement plan and closed the CRSP plan. We approved full communion with the Moravian Church and the Episcopal Church. We did not approve many of the petitions related to voting and membership rights for local pastors. We referred several petitions related to the office of bishop and formulas related to budgeting. One matter that will linger with us is the Judicial Council decision pertaining to the authority of the Interjurisdictional Episcopacy Committee. That committee is comprised of members of the 5 jurisdictional episcopacy committees. That's the group tasked with figuring out how the 32 approved bishops will be distributed and assigned across the United States. The Interjurisdictional Episcopacy Committee proposed no new elections, and the General Conference approved that recommendation. The Western jurisdiction is allotted 5 bishops. 2 of the current active bishops will retire in August, and the work between now and the jurisdictional conference in July will involve a process to determine which bishops from other jurisdictions are willing to serve in the West. The bishop must agree, the sending jurisdiction must agree, the receiving jurisdiction must agree. There are many unanswered questions regarding how the 5 Western jurisdiction episcopal areas will be assigned. But all in all, the spirit of General Conference was prayerful and calm. There were tears shed for many reasons. Some celebrated the election of the first African-American woman to serve as president of the Council of Bishops. We elected our very own Lori Day of the Oregon-Idaho Conference as a member of Judicial Council. Our delegates were active participants every day. They worked in close collaboration with the other delegations from the West and beyond. They prayed together and took care of one another. I am grateful for all the work that went into making General Conference work for the good of the whole. It was not perfect, but I can see how it is moving us toward perfection. I'm grateful for all the legislation that was considered, but friends, legislation is not the work. Our work begins now. Our work begins with us bending our knees in prayer, calling out to God, and leaning into one another. Our work begins by making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world through vital and relevant worship, active discipleship formation, and direct engagement in our ministry context. We must pay attention to those outside the church. Truth is, we've given 52 years to our internal strife and struggles. Might we give the next 52 weeks to matters beyond ourselves? We can work to make the United Methodist Church a safe and welcoming place for all God's beloved. We can invest in ministry that matters so that health and housing are priorities for all. We can consider what it means to serve beyond or outside our context. We can lift up the ministry of laity and affirm that all are called to serve. We can continue the work of eliminating racism and obstacles upheld by privilege. We can be about telling the story of Jesus and his radical love. We can live the gospel without dehumanizing and discriminating against one another or defacing God's creation. We can be great in the greater Northwest. We can and we will. All the best to you as you serve and make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.
Our bishop, greetings, Bishop. Please know that our open gay African-American bishop in our area is not very well received in other parts of the area. And so while we might be know that the places that he goes to aren't always safe. Even within the Oregon and Idaho conferences, there's resistance. And so with that message, I wanted to talk about and just share briefly about what I took away from General Conference, which has kind of echoes what we see and read from Psalm 1 as well. And the young people's address is anybody from the age of 18 to 30 who were nominated to speak at the 2020, but now are 4 years older. So everyone came with like, I'm not as young as I used to be, or I'm much older. But she and another friend made a point about how we've spent so much time. We really did spend so much time in the internal strife of this tension about issues over LGBTQIA siblings. And what she explained, how she described this whole scenario was as if parents are getting in a divorce. Parents were fighting over who's in, who's out, what's acceptable, what is not acceptable. And the young ones, we kind of left them. And we tried to protect them as much as we could, but the children were watching. And she was saying what happened was really painful, and that we witnessed really the fallout of when two consenting adults cannot come to agree. And with that, she made really important call out. But here's the thing. There was a time during our general conference when new petitions arrived, aside from 100, like 1,000 petitions that we had to review. And the petition was that we would leave a process for churches that disaffiliated. So these are folks who left and said, we don't want anything to do with United Methodist Church. They are not scriptural. They do not follow the Bible, very harsh things, and they left. And the proposal was that the current United Methodist, would make a way for churches that have left to re-affiliate. To re-affiliate should they choose to want to return. And there were people said, we want accountability. That means showing them what harm has been done and do not let them in. But it was not the righteous. It was the queer BIPOC folks. And I'm going to say what BIPOC is, or BILPOC, I say, is Black, Indigenous, Latinx, people of color, BILPOC. It was the queer BILPOCs who came and said, we need to keep it open. We need to keep it open because the church that nurtured me was in that space when everyone said, you're not loved, right? But I came out of that context because there were people willing to see me and believe me and stayed with me. And they were the ones calling out saying, we have to leave the grace. We have to leave room so that anyone who finds themselves struggling, not in the place where they think they should be, then should find their way back home to a place where all means all. And there were still righteous people like, they gotta know, right? And I could hear them. I could hear and see why they were presented so. But what touched me the most was that it wasn't the people who've been harmed against. The people who've been harmed, who've been told that you're less than, who've been told for centuries that we can't honor your marriage, or we can do it, but we got to do it in hiding. All these folks who've been harmed, who knew what it's like to belong, but not really, were the ones who came forward and said, our hearts, our grace is much bigger than what we think we can. And that's what we are here to do. And so it passed, folks. Thanks to the queer BILPOC folks presented and said, there's gotta be a way for them to return. We'll make accountability stuff. We'll line it up though, but we are not going to close just because we feel that we've been right all along. This idea of righteous and not righteous, it really boils down to, if I see myself as a righteous person, why are you laughing, Minnie? If I see myself as a righteous person, that's fine. But the second that I become a righteous person, I have this very keen idea of who's not righteous then. Isn't that right? As long as I'm righteous, I know who's falling short. Ooh, she didn't get that 10%, tithing. Ooh, she said she was going to do some volunteer work. I mean, the list goes on. Not that any of those are true, folks. But that's the problem with being righteous. When you are righteous, the second you tell yourself that, the other becomes the enemy. The other becomes the one that falls short. And the Psalm text that we read today, the wicked, and it makes us seem like it's binaries, two different things, right? That God is with the righteous and God is not here with the wicked. It doesn't really say that. The righteous puts themselves in that position, not because they're right, but they are following the principle of law, which is love. And those folks who think they're bad, we're bad too sometimes. Even the holiest person will say to you, please do not call me a reverend, because I know when I'm not holy. We all fall short. We all fall short. It's not that we're wicked. It's that we have failed to see that there is a stream of love that is able to nurture not only who are righteous and there, but it will nurture and give life to all that is around. Why can't we see that in that stream of water, all of us reside in there, not just the righteous, all of us, all of us. And so our task, folks, we've been pretty open about welcoming. Now it's even more time, more game time to say, not only do I see you, but all those people who are struggling too. Let me say this. Next week, Pastor Stephen Dilworth from West Portland Church is coming to preach here, and I will be pulpit swapping with him. This church is closing end of June. Our church year, fiscal year, they will close. They have discerned and prayerfully decided to close the church. Pastor Stephen Dilworth, who is there, is looking for a church that these siblings can find themselves in. I will also say our siblings are a bit maybe different or on a different spectrum. They might be not as open or may not feel comfortable in the LGBTQIA, but that doesn't mean that we get to be here and say, we're all welcoming. If you can't be with us, oh, too bad. It is our responsibility to bring them along, to help them see we're not the righteous ones here. We're following our principle of law, which is following love. So those transitions will come into place. And the first week of June, West Portland Church, the entire congregation will arrive at our place and break bread with us. Isn't it beautiful? We get to offer ourselves to them, and we could do it in a really meaningful way that says, I thought people with rainbows were like, oh, out there. Nah. It's people who have known what it feels like to be left out. It's people who know what it's like to be seen less than. We're going to do all of that. We're going to see them, we're going to welcome them, and we're going to grow with them. And if they choose not to come, we're not going to say, look, no. You still put your ground and say, you're always welcome. Mary, what? That is my message for you all. It's hard to perceive love when love is rarely rewarded. No one gets rewarded for feeding the houseless. No one gets rewarded for erecting a house for the houseless. Like, no, we don't show reward and love for that kind of labor. But the Spirit sees and Spirit knows. So I hope that we can continue living our call to love with great sweetness. Let us pray. Dear God, thank you so much for loving us. And loving scripture sometimes can be used as a weapon, but we also know that it was written by King David, who himself was someone with positional power and who abused, but was also a person who was abused by positional power. God, help us to find a way to love you in a way that does not harm and that does not strip away other people's paths to finding healing and revelation and liberation. For we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. And all of our beings, well-beings are interconnected. So God, may we become a vessel who lives as those United Methodist people, transforming the lives by bringing Jesus into our hearts, by expressing the radical love that he had for us, by always looking out in the margins, not holding our place higher than others, but accompanying those around us. Thank you, God. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for loving our community. Thank you for being with those who have stayed and held the fight to be a witness for us to stand our ground. We give you thanks. Amen.